Miss Stacy, and we have with Miss Stacy, Mr. Ola Tashuni, and of course with Mr. Ola Tashuni and Miss Stacy, Mr. Strobel. And so, Mr. Strobel, let's start with you during the second segment and to have you to talk about the death penalty and how you became involved in this situation.
As I started to mention earlier, in the theoretical objectivity of a classroom seminary, I was in the seminary at the time in the 60s, we talked about those issues of that moral issues and the positions we took for or against. And I found myself against the death penalty in those arguments. And the question was raised, well, in the objectivity of the classroom, what would happen? Would you change your mind if it happened to a member of your own family? And I said then that God forbid that anything would ever happen, but if I'm against it objectively in this classroom, I would hope I would be against it even if it happened to a member of my own family. And so never in my wildest imagination did I expect anything like that to happen. But in December of 1986, my mother was murdered. I was the pastor of the Holy Name Church over in East Nashville. And I knew then that the opposition was real. And I had to express our family's opposition to the death penalty and the message of forgiveness.
And Mr. Ola Tashuni?
Yeah, I think that, and I'm certainly moved by Charles's experience, and I really appreciate him being able to, be a face up here to rise above, people's desire for revenge. In my case, I spent 20 years on Tennessee's death row, and I mean every possible thing that could have went wrong in a death penalty trial, first off, went wrong in my case, and which led to me ultimately being convicted and sentenced to death. I think the important thing for me to say to those people that's out here listening is that as long as we have the death penalty, innocent people gonna end up being killed. And I think that we have to decide as a society and as certainly Tennesseans how we want to respond to the likelihood of an innocent person being executed. Like I said, I sit over there for nearly 20 years, and I'm not convinced, based on some of the people that I met over there and learned about their situation, that is not somebody in the same position that I found myself. And I think that we, like I said, as a state, we really have to be concerned about that. It's a miracle that I'm sitting here. I mean, I'm sitting here despite the system, not because the system worked. And I think a lot of time people, have this blind belief in the system that the system's good working, and the right people there. You got people sitting over there on death row. It's certainly not hell for the worst of the worst. You got people sitting over there, a person sitting over there on death row, for instance, was playing with a gun and accidentally shot and killed somebody. But because he wanted to exercise his right to a trial, then he was punished by the state seeking a death penalty against him after he refused to take a 25-year sentence. So the death penalty certainly it has problems. And I think that we have to, like I said, we have to decide how we're going to respond to people that commit certainly some horrific acts, just like Mr. Strobel said happened to his family.
Now, Ms. Rector, you are aware, I'm sure, that over the last 24 hours, we've had throughout the nation at least three, as a matter of fact, executions. Now, what would you say in reference to that during this segment of the show?
Well, I mean, obviously for reasons you've heard from Ndume in particular, I mean, it's problematic that we know how broken the system is, that people are ending up on death row because they're too poor to hire attorneys. There are people with intellectual disabilities and mental illness. We know that there have been 144 people released from death rows across this country when evidence of their wrongful convictions came to light. We know that there are serious problems, and yet we continue to execute people with a system that, frankly, we should not be trusting to ultimately decide who lives and who dies. We have alternatives to the death penalty. in Tennessee and around the country, there are life sentences, there's life without the possibility of parole, that are actually less expensive to taxpayers, that give victims' family members legal finality much quicker than the decades-long process of going through capital litigation, and that don't risk executing innocent people. So the question would be, why do we believe that we need to continue to do this? And frankly, I think that's changing, and people are beginning to say, maybe we don't need to be doing this.
And so, Mr. Strobel, you think that the death penalty is something that we ought not to have in the state of Tennessee, and so you're out as an advocate in reference to this?
Yes, and as Stacy has said, it doesn't fit the circumstances of justice and fairness and its application across the board. And we have alternatives that we're not talking about letting everybody go free.
Right.
If they've committed some horrendous crime, there's a way to contain that person and some secure surroundings, and it's cheaper. When you talk about all the cost of appeals after appeals after appeals, people are spending the state's spending millions of dollars to try to execute somebody. And from a family member victims, from our perspective, you remain stuck at that moment of death, of the murder, and are not able to move on with your life as hard as it is. And so by our offering an opportunity to give that person a chance for life without parole, we were able to move on as hard as it was as a family and not remain stuck in the appeal process.
And so there's something in reference to revenge and your own peace of mind. Is that what we're saying in a real sense?
Well, our faith perspective is a Christian perspective, and the founder of Christianity, Jesus himself, talks about forgiveness. And I think that overrides all other principles.
Very good. And of course, Mr. Olatushonte, when we come back during this final segment, we'll start with you and we'll have you to give some other statements. We'll have 10 minutes for this final segment. And let me encourage our audience to continue to listen and watch and listen for the final segment of the show.